Hi, you guys. All right, so having a little trouble with my asthma, but let's see if I can get through a chapter. So we are on one of my favorite chapters. So we are on Albert Cluveau, page 106, and you all should have the new book. Albert Cluveau had already killed more than a dozen people, black and white. Everybody knowed he had done it, and he wasn't hiding it either, telling everybody, "Oh, yeah, I've killed a few there in my time, I have." Hadn't he told me the same thing, and how many times? I was taken in washing then. I wasn't cooking for nobody. I had my little horse pigeon I used to ride to go pick up laundry. Then I brought them to my house and I washed them out there in the yard. To get water, all I had to do was draw it out of the river. All the good water I needed right across the road in front of my house. After I'd washed and ironed the clothes, I would get back on Pigeon and go take them back to the people. Had the whole stretch of the river from where I lived clear into Bayonne. In the evening, when it was cool, I would go down the riverbank and fish. In the summer, and when it was warm enough in the winter, I fished practically every day. Fish I couldn't eat, I used to give to other people, but I reckon I done ate much fish round here as anybody. It's good for you, fish. Fish and work. Hard work can kill you, but plain, steady work never killed nobody. Steady work and eating plenty fish never killed nobody. Greens, too. Greens are good, too. Fish and greens and good steady work. Plenty of walking, that's good. People don't walk no more. When you don't walk, you don't drink enough water. Good, clean water. Greens clear out your system. I used to go fishing just about every day, weather permitting. Turned my water pail upside down and sat on it till I got ready to go back home. Then I'd put my string of fishes in my pail and go up the bank. Albert Cluveau used to fish right there beside me. If the water was shallow, he would roll up his pant legs and wade out a piece. But most of the times, he sat on the ground fishing right there beside me, a short, bow-legged Cajun. His face looked like somebody had been jabbing it with an ice pick. Had that big patch of hair out the left side of his head. His head white where the hair had been, sitting there telling me about the people he had killed. I wasn't a Christian then. I didn't join the church till I came to Samson. But I used to say to myself, my Lord, will you just listen to this? You hear this man talking about killing men like you talk about killing snakes. But no matter how he talked, I would sit there and listen to him. Sometimes he would follow me up to the house and sit on my gallery and talk. Sometimes he would go round the house and sit in the back door while I fried fish for supper. If I said, "Mr. Albert, chop me a piece of wood," he'd get out there and cut enough wood to last me a week. If I needed something from the store, he would swing upon the mule and go get anything I needed. Sack of rice, flour, it didn't matter. He would bring it all back. After I had cooked, he'd sit right there at the back door and eat. Then we had our coffee. He liked his coffee strong, sweet, and black. Sometimes I got him off talking about killing. I would make him talk about fishing and raising crop. He could talk about anything because most of the people around here either fished or farmed for a living anyhow. But in the end, killing always came back in Albert Cluvau's mind. He wasn't bragging about it, but he wasn't sorry either. It was just conversation. Like if you worked in a sawmill, you talked about lumber more than you talked about cane. If you worked at the derrick, naturally you talk more about cane than you talk about trees. Cane is like sugar cane. Albert Cluveau had killed so many people he couldn't talk about nothing else but that. One day, while we was out there fishing, he said, "The people talking about your boy there, Jane. Just think I ought to tell you that." We was fishing in shallow water that day, and both of us was standing out there over the river. It was hot, and I could feel the hot river water on my legs. When Albert Cluveau said that about Ned, my heart started beating so fast I thought I might fall. I held on tight to the fishing pole till I was steady, and then I pulled in my line and I went back home. I never did go in the house. I just sat down in my chair in the gallery. I'm sitting there only a minute, and here he come. leaned his fishing pole against the end of the gallery and sat on the steps. Any coffee there, Jane? I didn't answer Albert Cluveau. What do you say to a fool? I sat there looking out at the river. After a while, he forgot he had asked me for coffee. Now he started talking about the people he had killed. He talked and talked sundown before he left my house. I got on Pigeon that night, and I went to see Ned. Ned was staying farther up the road, closer to Bayonne, just across the road from where he's buried now. I could see horses and mules in the yard when I rode up there. The children had ridden from all over the parish to attend classes. Ned used one of the rooms in his house for his school. I sat in the sitting room with Vivian and the children, and we could hear Ned talking to his students on the other side. After Vivian had put the children to bed, me and her sat up there by ourselves. She was never one to talk much, so we sat up there listening to Ned. 11 o'clock he dismissed class, but some of the children stayed there till midnight. I sat there with Vivian till the last one had gone home. Then I got up and went around the other side. Ned was sitting at the table with his head propped in his hands. He looked up when I came in. He thought I was Vivian. Hold on. I didn't know you were here, Mama, he said. I just dropped by. I had come in there to tell him what Albert Cluveau said, but I could see how tired he was, and I didn't want to burden his mind. Something the matter, he asked me. Nothing the matter, I said. I got here early. I just didn't want to disturb you. I'll ride back home with you, he said. Pigeon knows his way home, I said. He rubbed his hand hard over his face. I stood there looking at him. I still wanted to tell him about Albert Cluveau. It had been a long day, he said. I'm leaving, I said. You ought to stay here tonight, he said. I'm going to my own house, I said. He went outside with me and led Pigeon up to the gallery so I could get on. Next Sunday, Albert Cluveau came to my house and sat on the steps. I gave him some coffee, strong, sweet, and black. He sipped and sipped at that coffee, and then he said, They're talking about your boy there, Jane. They don't want him to build no school there. No. They say he just good to stir trouble amongst it. They want him to go back where he come from. They don't know Albert tell you this. A week or so later, I was in the yard heating water when I saw him getting off the mule. He came up to me and spoke. Then he just stood there looking at me. He just stood there looking at this water steaming in the pot. They want me to kill him, Jane, he said. You mean kill my boy? I said. If they say do it, I must do it, Jane. Raise your head, Mr. Albert, I said. He wouldn't. Mr. Albert, I said. He raised his head slowly and looked at me. Great killer he was, and scared of me. I didn't say a thing. I just looked at Albert Cluveau. Gray beard all over his old wrinkled face, watery old blue eyes. That old felt hat, sweat, stink torn at the top. An old man who ought to be sitting in the sun, here, talking about killing? Speak, Mr. Albert, I said. I tell them we all time fish there in the St. Charles River, he said. I tell them I eat at your house. I tell them you make Albert good Creole coffee. I tell them I say, Jane Gooden, woman, just like you see me there. I say, if he must stop, let Muriel stop him, not Albert. Albert and Jane, side by side, fish there in the St. Charles River. They say, Albert Cluveau, this is your patrol. Muriel's patrol farther down the river. If we say, Albert, stop that, Albert, you stop him. If you don't, Albert. Can you kill my boy? I asked him. I must do what they tell me, he said. Can you kill my boy? I asked him. Yes. I looked at Albert a moment. Then I felt my head spinning. I made one step toward the house. Then I was down on the ground. I heard somebody way off saying, Jane, what's the matter, Jane? I opened my eyes and I saw Albert Cluveau with his ugly face kneeling over me. And I thought I was in hell and he was the devil. I started screaming, Get away from me, devil! Get away from me, devil! Get away from me, devil! But all my screaming was inside and not a sound was coming out. I heard from way off, You sick, Jane? You sick? I was screaming, but I wasn't making any noise. I was struggling to get up, but I couldn't move. Get away, I said. Get away from me. I could hear myself, so I knowed he could hear me too. I saw him standing up, looking funny, like I shouldn't be talking to him like that. Looked like he wanted to say, Jane, what'd I say to make you act like that? I pushed myself up off the ground and started toward the house. You need a doctor, Jane? He said. Jane. I went in and laid down on the bed. That evening, I went to Ned. I didn't tell him I had fell, but I told him to beware of Albert Cluveau. All he said was, I will build my school. I will teach till they kill me. I went to Vivian. They'll kill him if he keep on, I said. Why don't you take them children back to Kansas? He'll have to follow you if you go. He told me when he was coming here, he could get killed, she said. But I came with him anyhow. I have to stay now. Wow. So Jane and Albert are friends. Albert's white, obviously, because he's Cajun. And so Cajun people are, I'm not Cajun, but people, I'm Canadian, and Acadians who are French people. They're French people that live down in like Louisiana, and they live up the Appalachian Trail. Acadians who migrated down to Louisiana are considered Cajun. They have a stronger French influence in them, and they cook a little differently too, and so they're called Cajun. So typically when we talk about people who are Cajun, they're usually Louisiana, and they are because their French heritage is sort of personified by just like, I guess, the customs. I forget exactly how, but when you come across some of these words like the Creole and Cajun and mulatto, Cajuns are white. They're white trash, but they're French heritage, French ethnicity. And they kind of cook a little different. They actually, when they first went down there, they spoke French. So that's why, like, down in New Orleans, there's like the French Quarter. So there's just a stronger influence down there. So anyway, so Albert is French, and he's Cajun, right? So he's Cajun. And he is friends with Jane, and they go fishing together. And so, this is a time, Reconstruction, some whites and blacks get along. Like, Jane is just so nice, and everybody likes Jane. She doesn't say bad things to people. She says it like it is. I like Jane because I feel like with Jane, what you see is what you get, and I kind of feel like I'm that kind of person. And so I think that Jane has a lot of friends. Jane's very well liked, and even though Albert is a killer, it's never really affected Jane. Like, she'd listen to him killing whatever. They were fishing, and she wouldn't say anything. And so, it was just all talk. But now they want to kill Ned, and that's beating on her heart, And so she's got some issues going on here, right? Because here's her friend, and her friend needs to kill her son. And he's clear with her. It isn't that he wants to. They're telling me I have to do this. And so it's really, this is really difficult for Jane. And, we don't really look at Albert like he's a racist, because look, he's good friends with Jane. He sits on Jane's doorstep, like he sits at the back door, because of two reasons. First, because he's a man, she's a woman, and there's no romantic relationship with them, but it's the proper thing to do, right? A man doesn't go into a house unless there's somebody else there to supervise. So he sits in the doorway, and he also because of the color difference, right? It's the proper thing to do. So he sits in the doorway while she cooks, but she feeds him and she gives him coffee, and they have a nice relationship. They're friends. And so she's really struggling with this. And I don't want to ask you about a time when you might have had a struggle similar, because I can't imagine any of us have gone through something like this. Um, but if you can put yourself in Jane's shoes, how would you feel? How would you feel if you had a friend who was told he had to kill or hurt, say hurt, he had to hurt somebody that you loved, right? How do you make that? I don't know if I could be friends with that person. I don't know. It's a really tough one. So, um, that's something you can journal. You could journal about fishing if you've ever been fishing. I used to go fishing with my dad on the boat. Not like a nice boat, like just a silly little motorboat. I dropped more lines in the water than anything. I don't think I ever caught anything. But anyway, you could write about fishing. You could write about just the allegiance of friendship. Jane feels that, Albert has an allegiance to her, right? And yet he has an allegiance to this other group. And are they the KKK? Are they the Chameleons, Louisiana? They could be. They could just be white supremacists. But he has an allegiance to them too, right? He works for them. And so that might be what gives him protection. We don't know. And so, you can write about that, about when you're conflicted with an allegiance, what do you do? Okay, so I didn't think there were any new vocabulary words in that chapter. I think it was a good chapter. So you go ahead, you do your journal entry, and I'll see you right back here very soon.